That wedding was never meant to be mine. My father chose the man I was to marry, but what no one expected was that my heart already belonged to another. The silk of my wedding gown felt suffocating against my skin, its weight pressing down on me as if carrying the burden of all the words I had never spoken. My hands trembled as they rested on my lap, fingers curled tightly around the delicate fabric. Outside the bridal chamber, I could hear the soft hum of violins, the murmurs of guests waiting for the ceremony to begin. This was supposed to be the happiest day of my life, and yet, I felt like a prisoner. My father had chosen Alexander Montgomery as my husband, a wealthy, influential man with a respectable name, the perfect match for a woman of my status. But I did not love him. I never had. My heart belonged to another, someone I should have forgotten long ago. No one knew about Samuel. We met during the summer of my 17th year. He was a commoner, the son of a bookseller, with ink-stained fingers and a smile that could light up the darkest corners of my world. We spent stolen afternoons beneath the willow tree near the lake, whispering dreams and promises we were too naive to realize we could never keep. "I'll come back for you," he had told me, pressing a trembling kiss to my palm the day he left. "No matter what, I'll find a way." But time passed, and no letters came. My father decided my fate, and I had been too cowardly to fight. A knock at the door startled me. My mother stepped inside, her face unreadable as she took in my expression. "It's time," she said softly. I swallowed the lump in my throat and nodded. But as she turned to leave, a commotion at the church entrance sent a ripple of whispers through the air. The door to my chamber burst open, and there he stood. Samuel. His chest rose and fell with ragged breaths, his dark eyes filled with something between desperation and determination. He had come back for me. My heart pounded. And for the first time in my life, I had to decide whether to obey or to finally fight for what was mine. I couldn't breathe. Samuel stood in the doorway, his chest heaving as if he had run all the way here. His dark eyes locked onto mine, searching, pleading, waiting for a sign that I still belonged to him. I gripped the armrest of the chair beneath me, my nails digging into the fabric, trying to steady the storm inside me. Behind him, voices rose in protest. My father's booming tone cut through the hushed whispers of the guests. "What is the meaning of this?" he demanded. "Who let this man in?" The guard stepped forward, ready to seize him. Samuel didn't move. "I came for her," he said, his voice firm, unwavering. "I came for Evelyn." The sound of my name on his lips sent a shiver down my spine. My mother gasped behind me. I turned to look at her, searching for any sign of softness, any sign that she would help me. But her face was as cold and unreadable as it had always been. My father took a step forward, his expression one of fury and disbelief. "You came for my daughter?" he repeated, his voice dripping with contempt. "And who are you to do such a thing?" Samuel lifted his chin, unfazed. "Someone who loves her." The room fell into stunned silence. My breath hitched. My heart pounded so loudly I thought everyone could hear it. "Guards, remove this man at once," my father barked. Samuel turned to me then, his gaze locking onto mine with a desperation that made my knees weak. "Evelyn," he pleaded, "say the word, and I'll take you away from here. We can leave, right now." The words sent a wave of longing through me. The thought of running away, of escaping this life I had never chosen, was like a dream I had once dared to hope for. But now, standing on the edge of that possibility, I hesitated. I knew what this would mean. If I left, I would lose everything. My family, my home, the security I had known my entire life. My father would never forgive me. Society would shun me. I would become nothing more than a disgrace, a stain on my family's name. But if I stayed, I would lose him. The guards moved closer, reaching for Samuel. He didn't resist, but his eyes never left mine. "Evelyn," he whispered, "please." Tears burned my eyes. My body trembled. I had spent years dreaming of him, of the life we could have had if only we had been given a chance. But dreaming and choosing were two different things. I turned to my father, to my mother, to the weight of expectation pressing down on me. Then I turned back to Samuel, the boy who had stolen my heart, the man who had come back for me despite everything. The guards grabbed his arms, and in that moment, I made my choice. "Let him go," I cried. The room erupted in chaos. My father's face turned red with fury. My mother let out a strangled gasp, and the guests whispered in shock. "Evelyn," my father growled, his voice dangerously low, "do not make a spectacle of yourself." But I had already made my decision. I ran forward before anyone could stop me, pushing past the guards and throwing myself into Samuel's arms. He caught me instantly, holding me so tightly I could barely breathe. "I'm sorry," I whispered against his shoulder, tears slipping down my cheeks. "I should have fought for you before." His hands trembled as they held me. "We still have time," he murmured. "We can still leave." "Over my dead body," my father roared. The guards reached for me, but Samuel reacted first. He grabbed my hand and pulled me toward the door. My heart pounded as I stumbled after him, my wedding dress catching under my feet as we ran. "Stop them!" my father bellowed. We burst through the grand doors into the stunned crowd of wedding guests. Faces blurred past me as we ran, gasps and shouts filling the air. I heard my father ordering the guards to seize us, heard my mother's frantic cries, but none of it mattered. All that mattered was the feel of Samuel's hand in mine, the strength of his grip, the unshakable certainty that, for the first time in my life, I was choosing something for myself. The sunlight hit us as we pushed through the church doors and into the open streets. My heart pounded. My breath came in short, desperate gasps, but I felt more alive than I had in years. Samuel turned to me, his eyes filled with emotion. "We're not safe yet. We have to keep moving." I nodded. I didn't care where we went. As long as I was with him, I was ready to face whatever came next. Behind us, the church bells tolled, marking the hour of the wedding that would never happen. But as we ran, hand in hand, I knew that this was only the beginning. We ran. The moment we stepped beyond the church doors, the weight of my old life threatened to pull me back. But Samuel's grip on my hand was strong, unwavering, guiding me forward as we tore through the cobbled streets. My heart pounded against my ribs, my breath coming in short, desperate gasps. Shouts erupted behind us. My father's furious voice cut through the air like a blade. "Evelyn, stop this at once!" I didn't stop. Samuel's pace was relentless, his fingers tightening around mine as we ducked into a narrow alley. My wedding gown was a disaster, lace snagging on rough stone, layers of silk tripping me with every step, but I didn't dare slow down. I hitched the fabric up, barely avoiding a fall, and pressed on. "We need to get to the docks," Samuel panted. "If we can reach the harbor before they catch us, we'll have a chance." "The docks?" My voice was hoarse. "Samuel, we have nowhere to go." "We do." He cut me off, his eyes blazing with determination. "I have a ship, a friend who owes me a favor. A ship, a way out." The reality of it struck me like a lightning bolt. This wasn't just a reckless escape. He had planned for this. He had come for me knowing exactly how we could leave this place behind forever. But could I do it? I glanced over my shoulder. The streets were alive with commotion. Guards in their uniforms pushing through the confused wedding guests. My father's furious form shoving people aside. My mother standing frozen in shock on the church steps. I could almost hear her voice in my head, the years of drilled obedience whispering through my mind. You are a Montgomery. You do not disgrace your family. But I had already disgraced them. There was no turning back now. Samuel pulled me forward. Come on. I nodded and ran. The alleyways twisted and turned, the city stretching before us like a maze. Samuel knew these streets better than I did, leading me through hidden paths, slipping past unsuspecting merchants and startled townsfolk. But the guards were closing in. I could hear their heavy boots pounding against the pavement, their shouts growing louder. "There!" one of them yelled. "Stop them!" We turned a corner sharply, and suddenly we were in the open market square. Vendors gasped, scattering as we pushed through. Baskets of fruit tipped over. Startled horses reared up, and the scent of freshly baked bread mixed with the thick stench of sweat and urgency. Samuel swore under his breath. "We're too exposed." He was right. We had lost the element of surprise. I could see the docks in the distance, the masts of ships swaying against the horizon. But the guards had spread out, cutting off easy escape routes. And then I saw him, Alexander Montgomery, my fiancé. He stood at the far end of the market, watching everything unfold with calculating eyes. He wasn't running toward us. He wasn't shouting like my father. He was waiting for me to fail, for me to surrender. Our eyes met, and for a split second the world seemed to slow. He looked at me as though I was a puzzle he had nearly solved, as if he had always known this moment would come. Then he took a step forward, straightening his coat, his expression unreadable. "You can't outrun this, Evelyn," he said calmly. "You know that." Samuel moved in front of me, shielding me with his body. "Stay away from her." Alexander ignored him. His piercing gaze remained on me. "This is madness," he continued. "Do you think running will solve anything? You are my betrothed. This wedding will happen." "No," I whispered. "It won't." A flicker of something passed through his expression. Annoyance? Amusement? I couldn't tell. "Your father will never let you go," he said. "And even if he did, do you really think he can protect you?" He nodded toward Samuel, his voice dripping with disdain. "What can he offer you? Poverty? A life on the run?" Samuel clenched his fists. "She's not yours to control." Alexander sighed as if this was all terribly inconvenient. "Evelyn, be reasonable. You know how this will end. I can make this easy for you. All you have to do is take my hand, and we can forget this ever happened." I stared at him, at the smooth, carefully controlled way he spoke, at the life he was offering me, a gilded cage, a place where I would be seen but never heard, desired but never truly loved. And then I looked at Samuel, breathless, wild, unpredictable, but real, alive. A man who had risked everything to come back for me. Samuel reached for my hand again, and in that moment, I knew my answer. I turned away from Alexander and grabbed Samuel's hand, gripping it tightly. Alexander sighed. "Very well." He raised a hand. The guards lunged. Samuel yanked me forward as chaos erupted. We ran toward the docks, pushing past startled sailors and dock workers. The salty breeze hit my face, my hair whipping wildly in the wind. "There," Samuel pointed. "That ship, the Seraphine, it's waiting for us." Hope bloomed in my chest. We were close, so close. But behind us, the guards were gaining ground. I heard my father's voice, raw with fury. "Seize them!" We reached the wooden planks of the dock just as more guards surged forward. Samuel pushed me ahead. "Go, get on the ship." I turned back just in time to see the guards closing in. Too many, too fast. Samuel fought them off, his fists flying, but he was outnumbered. One guard struck him hard and he staggered. "No!" I screamed. I moved without thinking. I grabbed a discarded wooden plank from the dock and swung it at the nearest guard, catching him by surprise. Samuel used the distraction to break free, grabbing my hand again as we stumbled toward the ship. A crewman was already waiting at the ramp. "Move, now!" he barked. We scrambled up, nearly falling as the ship rocked beneath us. The crew sprang into action, ropes being pulled, sails unfurling. "Cut the lines!" someone shouted. The ship lurched forward, moving away from the dock. I turned back, breathless, my heart hammering in my chest. My father stood at the dock's edge, his face red with fury. Alexander was beside him, his expression unreadable once more. The guards were powerless now, watching as the ship carried us farther and farther away. I had done it. I had chosen. As the city shrank into the horizon, Samuel pulled me into his arms. "You're safe," he whispered. For the first time, I let myself believe it. But deep down, I knew this was far from over. This was only the beginning. The wind howled around us as the ship cut through the open sea, the city we had left behind growing smaller on the horizon. My heart still thundered in my chest, my breath uneven as I clung to the railing, trying to steady myself against the rocking of the waves. We had done it. We had escaped. Samuel stood beside me, his body still tense, as if expecting the guards to suddenly sprout wings and drag us back to my father. His knuckles were bruised, his shirt torn at the sleeve where one of the guards had nearly pulled him down. He had fought for me. He had risked everything to bring me here. And yet, I knew we weren't safe. Not truly. The Seraphine was a modest ship, built for trade but sturdy enough to withstand the rougher seas. The crew bustled around us, their voices rough and urgent as they adjusted the sails and secured the rigging. They barely spared us a glance. To them, we were just two more passengers running from something. Samuel turned to face me, his dark eyes scanning me with concern. "Are you hurt?" I shook my head. "No." My voice was barely a whisper. "You?" He let out a breathless laugh, rubbing the back of his neck. "I'll survive." I reached for his hand before I could second-guess myself, my fingers tracing over the scrapes and bruises left from the fight. The warmth of his skin sent a familiar shiver down my spine, a reminder of all the nights I had dreamed of this moment, of being with him again, of running away, of choosing him over duty. But now that I had, the weight of that choice settled heavily on my chest. "What now?" I asked, my voice barely audible over the crash of the waves. Samuel hesitated for the first time. "We get as far from your father as possible. The captain owes me a favor. He agreed to take us south, past the trade routes where your family's influence doesn't reach." The realization hit me like a cold wave. "We have nowhere to go, do we?" Samuel tensed. "We'll figure it out." The certainty in his voice should have reassured me, but doubt gnawed at the edges of my mind. I had never been anywhere beyond the city's walls, never lived outside the carefully constructed world my father had built for me. I knew nothing of what lay beyond, only that I had thrown away every safety I had ever known. And yet, as terrifying as it was, the idea of going back was even worse. Samuel must have seen the uncertainty in my expression, because he reached up, gently tucking a loose strand of hair behind my ear. "Do you regret it?" he asked, his voice softer now. I exhaled shakily. "No." A slow smile spread across his lips, relief flooding his features. "Then we'll be all right." I wanted to believe him. As night fell, the sea stretched out in endless darkness around us, the stars above the only source of light. The Seraphine rocked gently beneath my feet as I sat near the stern, wrapped in a blanket a crew member had tossed my way. The salt air was crisp, biting at my skin, but I barely noticed. Samuel had left to speak with the captain, and I was alone with my thoughts for the first time since our escape. I should have felt free. Instead, I felt hunted. I knew my father. He would not simply let me go. He would send men after us. Men who would not rest until I was dragged back to face the consequences of my defiance. The thought sent a chill through me. I wouldn't get too comfortable. I turned at the voice. A man stood a few feet away, leaning against a crate with his arms crossed. He had the look of someone who had spent too many years at sea, weathered skin, sharp eyes that missed nothing, and an air of casual danger. I straightened. "Excuse me?" He shrugged. "You and your friend might have made it onto this ship, but that doesn't mean you're safe." A knot formed in my stomach. "What do you mean?" The man stepped closer, lowering his voice. "Word travels fast, miss? A girl in a wedding dress running through the streets? That's a story that gets around. If your family is as powerful as people are saying, it won't be long before ships start looking for you." My mouth went dry. "Who are you?" I managed to ask. "Just a sailor," he said, though the knowing glint in his eye suggested otherwise. "Name's Reynolds. I've been on this ship long enough to know when someone's running from something they can't outrun." I swallowed hard. "We won't be caught." Reynolds chuckled, shaking his head. "Hope you're right. But if I were you, I'd start thinking about what happens if they do catch up." A wave of unease rolled through me as he turned and walked away. Samuel returned not long after, looking exhausted but determined. "The captain agreed to take us as far as the next port," he said, sitting beside me. "After that, we'll have to figure out our next move." I nodded, staring out at the water. He must have sensed my unease. "Evelyn, talk to me." I hesitated, then told him what Reynolds had said. Samuel's expression darkened. "Damn it." He scrubbed a hand over his face. "I should have known word would spread this fast." "They'll come after us, won't they?" I whispered. Samuel didn't answer right away. When he did, his voice was firm. "They might try, but I won't let them take you." I turned to face him fully. The moonlight cast silver shadows across his face, highlighting the sharp angles of his jaw, the intensity in his eyes. "Samuel." His hand found mine, fingers lacing together like they had all those years ago beneath the willow tree. "Do you trust me?" I swallowed past the lump in my throat. "Yes." His gaze dropped to my lips, and for a moment neither of us moved. The space between us crackled with unspoken words, with years of longing left unanswered. Then he kissed me. It wasn't the chaste, hesitant kiss of our youth. It was deep, urgent, filled with all the words we had never been able to say. I melted against him, my fingers tangling in his shirt, my heart pounding so loudly I was sure he could hear it. When we finally broke apart, breathless, he rested his forehead against mine. "I love you," he whispered. Tears stung my eyes. "I love you too." For the first time since we fled, I let myself believe in this, believe in us. But deep down, I knew our fight wasn't over. The storm was still coming, and soon we would have to face it. The days blurred together as we sailed southward. The Seraphine cut through the waters at a steady pace, and with each passing hour, I felt the distance between myself and the life I had known grow wider, more impossible to return to. The sea was both a terrifying vastness and a strange kind of freedom. There were no walls here, no expectations, no watchful eyes. But there was still a heavy weight on my chest, the knowledge that we were being hunted. Samuel spent most of his time speaking with the captain, coordinating their course, making sure the crew stayed quiet about our identities. I had asked him once why we were avoiding the ports, why we couldn't simply dock at the next safe harbor and disappear into the crowd. His answer had been grim. "Your father's reach is long. He'll have men at every port. If we stop, even for a moment, we risk being caught." So we sailed on, the endless stretch of the ocean our only company. The sea was vast, but the weight of what we had done, the lives we had turned upside down, was always with me. I had left everything behind. My family, my status, my future. And for what? To live in exile with Samuel, a man I loved more than anything in this world, but a man whose life was as uncertain as my own? What if we didn't make it? What if we ran out of places to hide? What if I had made a terrible mistake? I spent many sleepless nights in my cabin, staring out at the dark water, wondering how far my father's rage would stretch, how long the world would stay silent to our flight. But each time I questioned it, each time doubt crept in, Samuel's face appeared in my mind, steady and sure, and I knew. I knew that whatever happened next, we would face it together. For all the uncertainty and danger, there were moments of peace. In the mornings, I would join Samuel on deck, where the sun rose in a golden blaze over the horizon. He would always be there first, his eyes scanning the vast, endless sea, his expression unreadable, as if searching for something far beyond the water. When I joined him, he would turn to me with that rare, soft smile that made my heart ache. Sometimes he would teach me how to handle the ship's wheel, how to adjust the sails, how to read the wind. It was thrilling in its own way, learning to control something so vast, so wild, and knowing that with each lesson, I was becoming more a part of this new life. But even in these quiet moments, there was a shadow hanging over us. We could never completely escape the weight of our decisions. There were always new dangers on the horizon, always that sense of someone, somewhere, watching, waiting. One morning, as we sailed into a new stretch of waters, the captain called us up on deck, his expression grim. "There's a ship on the horizon," he said, pointing toward a distant black speck. My stomach dropped. "Are they after us?" Samuel asked, his tone quiet but edged with tension. The captain hesitated. "I don't know, but it's moving fast and it's getting closer." I stood frozen, staring at the approaching ship, the knot in my stomach tightening with each passing moment. The distance between us and the other vessel closed rapidly, and I could feel the fear creeping up my spine. "Is it a merchant ship?" Samuel asked. "No," the captain replied, squinting into the distance. "That's no merchant ship. That's a naval vessel." The realization hit like a cold slap. Samuel cursed under his breath. "Your father," he muttered. "He's found us." I turned to him, panic rising in my chest. "What do we do?" Samuel's eyes darkened. "Get below deck, now." I didn't hesitate. I ran to my cabin, my heart pounding in my chest. The crew scrambled to prepare for a potential confrontation, moving with swift, practiced movements, securing the cargo, lowering the sails. The air was thick with tension. I could hear the heavy footfalls of the crew on deck, shouting orders to each other. The sound of the other ships approaching cannon sent a sick feeling through my stomach. Then came the voice of the captain, calling down to us from above. "Prepare yourselves. We're going to try to outrun them." I gripped the edge of the wooden table in my cabin, trying to steady my breath. Samuel had gone to help with the ship's maneuvers, leaving me alone with my thoughts, and the ever-encroaching sense that our time had run out. I didn't know how long I stayed in that room, but the ship's violent rocking, the harsh crash of waves against the hull, told me it had been hours. Time stretched in ways I couldn't comprehend, and I couldn't shake the sense that we were barreling toward an uncertain end. And then, finally, the door to my cabin burst open. Samuel's face was ashen, his hair wet with sweat, his eyes wide with urgency. "Get your things. Now." I jumped to my feet. "What's happening?" "They're close. We're not going to outrun them. We have to abandon ship." Abandon ship. The words struck me like a blow. I didn't have time to think, to process what he was saying. My hands shook as I grabbed the nearest things, my coat, my purse, anything I could hold on to, and followed him up to the deck. The sight before me nearly made me freeze. The naval ship was nearly alongside us, massive and imposing. I could see the black flag fluttering in the wind, and my stomach churned at the thought of what they would do when they boarded us. Samuel grabbed my arm, pulling me toward the lifeboats. "Move, Evelyn. We don't have time." I could hear the booming sound of a cannon firing as the naval ship's crew prepared for a direct hit. The Seraphine rocked violently as the first cannonball struck the water near us, sending waves splashing over the deck. I stumbled, but Samuel caught me, his grip tight and unyielding. "Stay with me," he shouted, his voice cutting through the chaos. We reached the lifeboat, and I barely had time to process what was happening before Samuel shoved me into it. The crew began to lower the boat into the water, working quickly but methodically. Just as the boat was about to touch the water, the final cannonball hit the Seraphine directly. The sound was deafening, and the ship shuddered under the impact. I gasped, my heart stopping as I looked back. The Seraphine was sinking. The ship was breaking apart, its wooden structure splintering as the hull began to crack. "Go!" Samuel shouted, pulling me away from the wreckage. We were in the lifeboat now, drifting in the open sea, watching as the once proud ship sank beneath the waves. My heart twisted with a terrible sorrow for the crew who had served us, for the ship that had carried us so far. But there was no time for grief. The naval vessel was still there, closer now, and we were completely exposed. I could feel the tension rising in the lifeboat, the danger pressing in around us. We had made it out, but for how long? Samuel didn't look back at the sinking ship. His eyes were fixed on the horizon, scanning the waters, calculating their next move. "Hold on," he whispered to me, his voice low and determined. "We're not done yet." I nodded, my heart pounding, my hands still trembling from the shock. This wasn't over. Not by a long shot. The cold ocean waves slapped against the sides of the lifeboat as it drifted further into the open sea. The Seraphine was now nothing but a memory, sinking into the depths of the ocean like a forgotten dream, its flames lighting up the dark horizon for only a brief moment before they too vanished into the night. But the naval vessel, its black sails and ominous silhouette, was still out there, looming, patient, like a predator waiting to close in on its prey. I sat at the edge of the lifeboat, clutching the wet, frayed rope in my hands, my gaze fixed on the dark water beneath us. The waves lapped gently at the boat's sides, but my heart was in chaos. My mind spun with questions, with fear, with doubt. Every part of me screamed that we couldn't survive this, that we were too exposed, too vulnerable. But Samuel kept his eyes on the horizon, his jaw clenched tight, his posture unyielding. "We need to keep moving," he said, his voice low, barely audible over the wind. I nodded, though part of me wanted to argue. Every instinct told me to retreat, to find shelter. But there was nowhere to hide here in the middle of the vast ocean. We were completely exposed. With a swift motion, Samuel grabbed the oar and began to row, pulling the boat forward with forceful strokes. I scrambled to help, though my hands were shaking, my body still trembling from the shock of our escape. My heart was heavy with a mixture of fear and disbelief. How had it come to this? How had we gone from running away from a wedding I never wanted to a life on the run, abandoned in the middle of the sea? I caught Samuel's eye, my voice trembling. "Where are we going?" His gaze softened for a brief moment, but it was fleeting. "Away, as far from that ship as we can. We need to find land, any land. The closer we are to civilization, the greater the risk." I felt a knot tighten in my chest. "But we can't keep drifting like this. We'll run out of supplies. The ocean, it's endless." He didn't respond right away. His focus was entirely on the task at hand, rowing with relentless determination. But I could see the strain in his features, the weight of their reality sinking deeper into him with every stroke of the oar. He wasn't just trying to escape, he was trying to survive, for us both. The hours stretched on like that, the waves unrelenting, the wind biting at our skin. We worked in silence, pushing through the exhaustion that gnawed at our bodies. Each minute felt like an eternity as the darkness of the sea closed in around us, the vast emptiness pressing against my chest, suffocating in its solitude. There were moments when I thought I could feel the presence of the naval ship, looming just beyond the edge of my vision, always just out of sight, but never truly gone. Finally, as the night deepened, Samuel spoke again. His voice was hoarse now, strained from hours of rowing, but his resolve hadn't wavered. "We need to talk," he said, his eyes fixed on the horizon. "We can't keep running forever." My stomach dropped, a mixture of dread and anticipation flooding my veins. "What do you mean?" He didn't answer right away, his oar moving steadily in the water, but I could see the conflict in his eyes. He was weighing something heavy, something that I couldn't quite place. "Evelyn, I love you," he said, his voice breaking slightly, as if he needed to say the words aloud to make them real. "I've always loved you, but this isn't just about us anymore. Your father, his reach, it's not just about us escaping. It's about survival, and we need to be prepared for that." I felt my heart tighten in my chest. The words hurt, but not because they were untrue. They hurt because I knew deep down that he was right. We weren't just running from my father anymore. We were running from the consequences of everything we had done. I reached for his hand, my fingers brushing against his, feeling the calluses of a man who had fought to protect me and would keep fighting, no matter what. But I couldn't hold on to him tightly enough to erase the weight of his words. "So what do we do now?" I asked quietly, afraid of what his answer might be. He looked at me, his eyes dark, haunted by a truth neither of us wanted to acknowledge. "We keep moving forward. We find a way to survive. We find a place where no one knows who we are. And we..." Suddenly, his words were cut off by a distant shout. A voice carried on the wind, muffled but unmistakable. The hairs on the back of my neck stood on end as the sound pierced through the stillness of the night. "Over there!" someone yelled. The voice was sharp, commanding. It was the voice of a soldier. My breath caught in my throat. My heart skipped a beat as I turned to Samuel, my eyes wide with fear. "They've found us." Samuel's expression hardened, and in an instant, I saw the same steely resolve take over his features. He didn't hesitate. He grabbed the oar and began rowing faster, pushing the lifeboat forward with all the strength he had left. I followed suit, paddling desperately, but my arms felt like lead, my body unable to keep up with the urgency of the moment. The sound of the naval ship's crew shouting grew louder, their voices mingling with the crashing of waves. They were close, too close. And no matter how fast we rowed, the distance between us and the approaching ship was shrinking. "We can't outrun them," Samuel said, his voice steady, despite the rising panic in my chest. "We need to find a way to fight." My mind raced. Fight? How could we fight? We had nothing. No weapons, no way to defend ourselves. We were just two people, alone, lost in the vast ocean. "Fight?" I whispered, my voice trembling. "What do you mean?" Samuel's eyes met mine, full of a wild, desperate resolve. "We find a way, Evelyn. We're not going down without a fight." I looked out into the dark, endless expanse of the sea, my heart pounding in my chest. The waves seemed to be closing in around us, the air thick with tension, with the bitter taste of fear. Somewhere, in the distance, the naval ship was waiting, patient, inexorable. We had nowhere to go but forward, and the storm was about to hit. The night felt colder, darker, more oppressive than ever as the naval ship loomed closer, its shadow stretching across the surface of the water like a harbinger of doom. The shouting grew louder, echoing across the waves, a cacophony of voices shouting orders and commands as the crew scrambled to close the gap between us and them. I could barely breathe as I frantically paddled in the lifeboat, my hands raw and trembling. The effort of rowing felt impossible, my body screaming for rest, but the knowledge that we had no time, no option but to escape, drove me forward. Samuel was beside me, his muscles straining as he rowed with a determination I had never seen in him before. His brow was furrowed, his eyes intense as he fought against the pull of the ocean, pulling the boat farther and farther from the deadly threat behind us. The sound of their pursuit reached a fever pitch, and my heart hammered in my chest as I turned toward Samuel, desperation clawing at my throat. "We can't keep this up forever. We'll never make it." His gaze met mine, and there was a flicker of something in his eyes, something that felt like both sorrow and resolve. He opened his mouth, but before he could say anything, a deafening crash echoed from behind us. I whipped around to see the massive naval ship firing its cannons, the sound reverberating through my very bones. The first blast missed us by mere inches, sending a wave of water splashing over the side of the lifeboat, drenching us both. I gasped, heart pounding in my ears. The force of the cannonball's impact rattled the small boat, throwing us both off balance. My hand slipped off the oar, and I nearly tumbled overboard, the cold, salt water splashing against my face as I struggled to right myself. "Evelyn!" Samuel shouted, his voice sharp with fear as he grabbed my arm and pulled me back into position. "Get a grip. We need to keep moving." The lifeboat rocked violently again as another cannonball exploded just beside us, the force of the blast making the boat groan under pressure. I barely had time to react before I was splashed with cold seawater once more, my breath stolen by the shock of it. The ship was closing in, its dark silhouette now unmistakable against the night sky. I could see the sailors on deck, their faces painted with grim determination, and I knew, deep down, that they wouldn't stop until they had us. The thought of being captured, of being dragged back to my father, made my stomach churn. But there was more at stake now. Our lives were hanging by a thread. I turned back to Samuel, my voice barely a whisper. "What do we do? How can we escape this?" His face was set in determination, his jaw clenched with resolve. "We fight. We can't outrun them, but we can make them think we're not worth the trouble. If they think we'll resist." The sentence was cut off by the roar of another cannon blast, this one far too close. The lifeboat rocked again, and this time, I lost my grip on the side, toppling into the water. Cold shock gripped me instantly, my body frozen as the freezing salt water engulfed me. I gasped for air, the sound of my breath swallowed by the crash of waves. Before I could even react, strong arms were around me, pulling me back up. Samuel's face appeared above me, his expression tense but unwavering as he hauled me back into the boat, the grip on my arm nearly painful as he steadied me. "Stay with me, Evelyn," Samuel ordered, his voice fierce. "We can't lose focus now." I nodded weakly, still trembling from the cold shock, but there was something in his voice, something fierce, that cut through the panic. We had no choice now but to fight. Samuel worked quickly, grabbing what little we had left in the lifeboat. There were 2 small daggers hidden beneath the seats, tools meant for survival in case of an emergency, and he handed one to me. My fingers were stiff, but I wrapped my hand around the hilt, feeling the cold metal beneath my palm. There was no real plan, no perfect strategy. We were outmatched, outnumbered, and yet, somehow there was still a flicker of hope. A tiny, fragile ember that urged me to keep fighting. The ship was too close now. They would board us any minute. Samuel took the other dagger and stood at the edge of the boat, his eyes fixed on the naval ship. He was calculating, waiting for the perfect moment. The sea was still, and the wind had shifted in our favor for just a second, enough for him to make the first move. "Get ready," he whispered to me. "Whatever happens, stay with me. We fight together." I nodded, swallowing back the fear rising in my throat. I gripped the dagger tightly, my knuckles white, my body bracing for the inevitable. A long, tense moment passed. The naval ship was now within range. The crew's movements were swift and practiced, and I could see the ropes being thrown down, the sailors preparing to board. And then, with a flash of movement, Samuel launched himself forward, a fury in his eyes that I had never seen before. He swung the oar with all his might, knocking one of the boarding ropes off course. I watched in stunned silence as the sailors scrambled to recover, their surprise giving us a brief window of opportunity. I seized the moment, my heart pounding in my chest. With a cry, I thrust the dagger forward toward a sailor who had been aiming to board us. He stumbled backward, momentarily off balance, and I didn't hesitate. I drove the dagger deeper, my body moving on instinct. The sailor's face twisted in shock, and before he could react, Samuel had knocked him unconscious, sending him sprawling back onto the naval ship. "We're not going down without a fight," Samuel muttered, his voice low but steady as he wiped the blood off his hands. His gaze turned cold and calculating as he scanned the ship's deck. He wasn't done yet. The naval sailors were recovering quickly, realizing that we weren't going to be easy prey. More ropes were thrown over the side, and more sailors began to drop down into the lifeboat. This was it, our last stand. I fought fiercely, using every ounce of strength I had left, fending off attackers with the dagger, my legs shaking beneath me, my breath coming in ragged gasps. Samuel was beside me, his own moves fluid, deadly, as he cut down any sailor who dared get too close. We worked together with terrifying precision, our bodies moving as one, each of us protecting the other, each of us refusing to be taken. But there were too many of them. The boat was swarmed, and the chaos became a blur of flashing steel and splashing water. I was exhausted, my strength fading with each passing moment. The dagger in my hand felt heavier, useless against the growing tide of men. But then, just as I thought we would be overrun, something incredible happened. The ocean itself seemed to answer our cries for help. His face was a mask of determination as he fought to control the boat. But the storm had grown stronger, and we were helpless to stop it. The waves were towering now, crashing over us with terrifying force, and I felt my grip slip, the icy water splashing into the boat with each new wave. In an instant, the boat tilted violently to one side, and before I could react, the water surged over the edge, pulling me under. The world turned upside down, the pressure of the sea closing in on me as I was dragged beneath the surface. I fought for air, my lungs burning, but I couldn't find the surface. The darkness of the ocean surrounded me, the pressure building in my chest as I flailed for anything to hold on to. I felt the panic set in, the fear gripping my heart as I struggled against the current. I was going to drown. The thought was an anchor, weighing me down further into the depths. My mind went blank, my body moving on instinct, trying to fight my way back to the surface. And then, through the haze of panic, I felt someone, grabbing me, pulling me upward. The familiar strength of Samuel's arms wrapped around me, lifting me out of the depths, his grip unyielding as he dragged me back to the lifeboat. "Evelyn?" Samuel's voice was frantic, but there was no time for relief. He didn't give me a chance to breathe. He hauled me back into the boat, his hands moving with urgency. "Hold on! Just hold on!" I gasped for air, coughing up water as he lifted me back into the boat, his own body shivering from the cold, his face pale but focused. He was still holding on, still fighting, just like he always had. "Don't let go," he whispered urgently, his voice strained. "We're almost there." I didn't know if I believed him, didn't know if I could believe him. The storm had swallowed us whole, and everything was a blur of water and wind and fear. But there was something in his eyes, something that said we could still make it. And maybe, just maybe, if I held on long enough, I could survive this. Together, we fought against the storm. Together, we fought to live. Hours passed, and the storm showed no sign of relenting. The lifeboat had become little more than a fragile vessel at the mercy of the sea. Samuel and I both clung to it, taking turns trying to row, but each stroke felt like a battle against a force much stronger than us. But then, just when I thought I couldn't go on anymore, something changed. The waves began to subside, the winds died down, leaving only the rhythmic sound of the ocean against the boat's sides. The dark clouds parted slowly, revealing a faint sliver of moonlight breaking through. "We're here," Samuel said, his voice low but filled with relief. I turned toward where he was pointing, my heart leaping in my chest as I saw it. The faint outline of land. A small island, its silhouette just visible on the horizon. We weren't alone anymore. The storm had passed. We had made it. The island loomed before us, its dark silhouette a promise of safety, or at least the possibility of it. We could see its jagged outline rising out of the ocean, the waves crashing violently against its rocky shores. It was smaller than I had imagined, a tiny patch of land, barely visible in the distance until the clouds parted and the moonlight shone through, revealing the shoreline that seemed so distant, so unattainable just hours ago. Samuel's face softened for the first time since the storm had begun. There was a flicker of something in his eyes. Relief, hope, perhaps even exhaustion. But there was still no time to waste. The waves were beginning to calm, but the lifeboat was still fragile, and it could capsize at any moment. We had to make it to land. He gripped the oars with renewed determination, his muscles straining as he paddled harder, steering us toward the shore. The boat creaked under the pressure, and I kept my eyes fixed on the island, willing myself to hold on just a little longer. I wanted to speak, to say something to break the silence that had hung between us ever since the storm had taken us by surprise. But words felt so inadequate in the face of everything we had endured. The exhaustion had set in, both physical and emotional. I felt it in every part of my body, in the deep ache of my bones, in the tightness of my chest. But there was one thing I knew for certain. I wasn't going to let Samuel fight this alone. Not now, not ever. The shoreline was getting closer, and I could almost taste the salt in the air, the promise of solid ground beneath our feet. But the journey wasn't over. There were still obstacles to face, still the unknown waiting for us on the island. "I think we're going to make it," I said, my voice raw but strong. "Samuel, He didn't let me finish. "Keep your focus," he said curtly, his tone hard but not unkind. "We can't let our guard down yet. We don't know what's waiting for us there." I nodded, understanding the weight of his words. This island might offer us shelter, but we were still far from safe. It wasn't just the storm that had threatened to end us. It was the world itself. It was the unknown, the forces that lay just beyond our reach, waiting for the right moment to strike. The lifeboat scraped against the rocks, and for a moment, I thought we would crash, the jagged edges of the stones threatening to tear through the hull. But Samuel was quick, his hands steady as he guided us gently toward a small cove at the base of a cliff. The boat's bottom scraped against the rough rocks as he brought us in, the sound a reminder of how close we had come to disaster. We were there. We had made it. As the boat came to a halt, I finally allowed myself a moment to breathe. My chest heaved with the effort, and I felt a wave of gratitude flood through me. We had survived. But now came the harder part, getting off this lifeboat and stepping onto land. I couldn't help but wonder what awaited us on the island, what dangers lay hidden in the shadows of its dense jungle, what secrets it might hold. But for now, I pushed those thoughts aside. We were safe, at least for the moment. Samuel jumped out of the boat first, his feet landing with a soft splash on the rocky shore. He turned back to me, his hand outstretched, as if to pull me into the safety of the land we had just reached. I took his hand without hesitation, allowing him to help me step out of the boat and onto the cold, uneven ground. Once on land, I took a deep breath, my lungs filling with the fresh, salty air of the island. The sky above was still dark, but the storm had passed. The moon shone brightly, casting long shadows across the shore. We had made it to this forsaken place, but the question remained: what were we supposed to do now? I glanced around, taking in the landscape. The island was smaller than I had imagined, its rocky coast surrounded by thick, lush jungle. The trees loomed like dark sentinels, their shadows stretching across the sand, and I couldn't shake the feeling that something was watching us from within the dense foliage. But there was no time to dwell on the creeping unease that tightened in my chest. We had to find shelter. We had to survive. "I'll take a look around," Samuel said, his voice low and determined. "Stay here. If anything happens, shout." Before I could protest, he disappeared into the darkness, his figure swallowed up by the dense undergrowth. I watched him go, my heart heavy with uncertainty. I didn't want to be alone, but I understood the necessity of scouting the area. The island might seem deserted, but I knew better than to assume we were the only ones here. I sank to the ground, my body finally giving in to the exhaustion that had been building in me for hours, maybe days. The cold from the ocean still clung to my skin, and I wrapped my arms around myself, trying to hold on to the fragile warmth of my own body. I tried to focus on the sound of Samuel's footsteps receding into the jungle, the rhythm of his movements a comfort in the otherwise eerie silence. The island felt alive, but in a way that unsettled me. The night was thick with the sounds of distant creatures, chirping insects, rustling leaves, and the occasional low growl that made my skin prickle with fear. I tried not to listen to the sounds, to not imagine what could be lurking just beyond my reach. The fear of the unknown was a constant companion, gnawing at me as I waited, hoping that Samuel would return soon. Minutes passed, or maybe hours. It was hard to tell in the darkness. The night seemed endless, the silence so profound that it felt as though the world itself had ceased to move. And then, I heard it. A crack of branches, a rustle in the jungle. I froze. My heart hammered in my chest as I tried to peer into the darkness, straining my eyes to see through the dense underbrush. For a long moment there was nothing, just the sound of the wind rustling the trees and the distant crash of waves on the shore. And then, the sound came again, closer this time. I stood, my body tense, every nerve on alert. What was it? A wild animal? Another shipwrecked soul? Or something worse? A figure stepped into the moonlight and I let out a breath I hadn't realized I was holding. Samuel was back, his expression grim but unchanged. He was holding something in his hand, a small piece of cloth stained with what looked like dirt, or something worse. His eyes met mine, and I saw the tension in them, the flicker of something darker than I was prepared for. "I found something," he said softly, his voice tinged with an emotion I couldn't place. "You need to see this." He motioned for me to follow him, and though a part of me wanted to hesitate, to question him, I followed. The uncertainty that gnawed at my stomach told me that this island was hiding secrets. Secrets we had yet to uncover. We ventured deeper into the jungle, the darkness closing in around us as we stepped carefully over rocks and roots. The air was thick and heavy, the smell of damp earth and decay making my stomach turn. The deeper we went, the more oppressive the silence became, until I felt as though the very jungle itself was holding its breath. And then we saw it. A structure, half hidden by the overgrown vines and foliage. A building, old and weathered, its stone walls crumbling in places but still standing firm. There were symbols etched into the stone, patterns I couldn't decipher, but they looked ancient, too old to belong to anyone we knew. My breath caught in my throat. "What is this?" I whispered, unable to tear my eyes away from the ruins. Samuel's expression was unreadable as he approached the structure, kneeling beside a stone that had been carved with intricate markings. "This island," he said quietly, "wasn't always uninhabited." I looked at him, confusion clouding my mind. "You mean someone lives here?" He stood up slowly, his eyes scanning the ruins with an intensity that unsettled me. "I don't think anyone lives here anymore, but someone once did, and what they left behind." He trailed off, his voice distant. "Samuel, what are you trying to say?" I asked, my voice trembling now. There was something in his tone that made my skin prickle. He turned to me, his eyes locked onto mine, and I saw the weight of the past in them, something that had been buried for far too long. "I think this island hides more than we realize." Suddenly, the air felt colder, and I knew without a doubt that we had stumbled into something far bigger than either of us could have ever imagined. Something that would change everything. The silence of the jungle pressed in around us, thick and oppressive. The air was heavy with the scent of damp earth and decaying leaves, and the moonlight barely pierced through the canopy, casting long shadows across the stone ruins before us. Samuel stood motionless beside the old structure, his gaze fixed on the crumbling walls as if something there had caught his attention, something he wasn't ready to share just yet. I felt a chill creep up my spine, the sense that we had crossed a line, one we couldn't uncross. The island, once a refuge, now felt like a prison. I tried to steady my breathing, my heart pounding in my chest as I fought to ignore the unease rising within me. I couldn't help but glance over at Samuel. His usual confidence was gone, replaced by a look of caution, something darker in his eyes. He hadn't said a word since we first arrived here, and every second of silence felt like 1,000 questions unanswered. "What is it, Samuel?" I asked again, my voice shaking slightly, betraying the fear I hadn't allowed myself to feel until now. He turned to me then, his face softening just enough to show the exhaustion that had built up in him, but also a deep sense of foreboding. "I don't know if you're going to believe this," he said quietly, "but there's something on this island, something old, something that's been here long before we arrived." I swallowed hard, trying to make sense of his words. It was hard enough to process everything that had happened just to get here. But now it seemed the island had more secrets than I was prepared to uncover. "Something old? Samuel, what do you mean?" I took a cautious step forward, drawn to the ruins, to the mystery that now defined this place. My curiosity gnawed at me, but a nagging sense of danger tugged at the edges of my mind. He didn't answer immediately. Instead, he motioned for me to follow him, stepping closer to the structure. His steps were measured, careful, as if he was expecting something to happen. As I approached the crumbling stones, I could see more clearly the strange symbols etched into them, symbols that seemed too deliberate, too purposeful to be just random markings of nature. "It's not just the architecture," Samuel continued, his voice quieter now. "I've seen this before. Not exactly like this, but similar symbols. They're ancient. Who built this?" I interrupted, my voice sharp with urgency. I couldn't understand why this place felt so wrong. The shadows seemed to grow darker around us, the jungle closing in, as though it were listening, waiting. Samuel's eyes met mine again, and I saw a flicker of hesitation in them. He hesitated just a moment before answering. "A civilization, long gone. I don't know much about them, but I've read about them. My father, he used to tell me stories about these people. They were worshippers of something that lived beneath the surface." My heart skipped a beat, and I stepped back, my pulse quickening. "What do you mean, something beneath the surface?" Before Samuel could answer, a loud cracking sound echoed through the jungle, followed by a low rumble from deep within the earth. The ground beneath our feet trembled, and I grabbed onto the nearest stone for support, my breath catching in my throat. "Stay close," Samuel ordered, his voice tense, his expression hardening. "We're not alone here. We need to get inside." I didn't ask questions. There was no time. Whatever Samuel had uncovered, whatever secrets this island held, it was clear that we were in danger. Deep, unfathomable danger. We made our way quickly to the entrance of the structure, weaving through the dense undergrowth and into the shadowed interior. The air inside was thick with dust and the scent of mildew, the walls damp with age. The stone floor was uneven, and the temperature seemed colder, almost unnatural. It felt like a place long abandoned, forgotten by time, and yet, something told me that we were far from alone. Samuel led the way, his footsteps echoing off the stone walls as we descended deeper into the ruin. It seemed to go on forever, winding and twisting in ways that defied logic. The air grew heavier with every step, and I couldn't shake the feeling that we were being watched, stalked, perhaps. We reached a large chamber, its high ceiling held up by pillars that had been worn down by centuries of neglect. In the center of the room was a stone altar, its surface covered in intricate carvings. The same symbols that were etched into the exterior of the structure. Symbols I couldn't understand, but that seemed to pulse with a strange energy. "What is this place?" I whispered, my voice trembling as I took in the sight of the altar. It was as if the air itself had changed, thickening with an almost palpable presence. Samuel didn't answer right away. Instead, he walked slowly toward the altar, his hand brushing lightly against the carvings. His face was pale, his lips tight. He seemed lost in thought, his eyes distant, as though he were remembering something long buried. "This place," he said after a long pause, his voice hoarse, "was a temple. They believed in something darker than any god I've ever heard of." My heart pounded. What was it? What did they worship? He turned to me, his expression grim. They worshipped a force that they believed was eternal, something buried beneath the earth, a creature, an entity. And when they built this temple, they made a terrible mistake. They didn't realize what they were unleashing. I felt a chill run down my spine, my breath catching in my throat as I glanced around the chamber. What did they unleash? Samuel took a step back, as if trying to distance himself from the altar. "I don't know," he said quietly, "but I think we've found it." At that moment, the rumble from deep within the earth grew louder, a deafening sound that seemed to shake the very walls of the temple. The stone beneath our feet cracked and shifted, and the ground began to tremble violently. I backed away, my heart racing. "Samuel, we have to go. Now this place. It's alive." But Samuel stood rooted to the spot, his face pale with realization. "It's too late," he whispered. "It's already awake." The ground split beneath us, and a deafening roar echoed from the depths of the earth. A massive shadow rose from the darkness below, its form shifting, monstrous, unnatural. Its eyes glowed with an otherworldly light, its presence suffocating, filling the entire chamber with a sense of impending doom. We turned to run, but the ground cracked again, and the stone walls began to crumble. The jungle outside was no longer safe, and the island, this forsaken place, had become a prison. We had unwittingly awoken something ancient, something terrible, and now we were its prisoners. As we fled into the darkness of the jungle, the ground behind us shook with every step the creature took. Samuel grabbed my hand, pulling me forward, our breaths ragged in the air. I didn't look back. I didn't need to. The roar from the temple had been enough to tell me that we had no hope of surviving this. And yet, we kept running. We had to. Because the truth was, there was no escape. The island wasn't just a place of refuge. It was a tomb. And we were its last inhabitants, trapped in a nightmare that had only just begun.